Okay, we are going live on YouTube.
Okay. If you, I'm gonna just keep you on the phone until I see you come into the meeting. You're gonna try to zoom in.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome all of you to this joint meeting of the Columbus City Council and Planning Commission.
Hold you just one moment. Are your speakers working?
Yes.
Should I keep going?
I'm guessing it's not
Okay.
picking up.
Looks good. You gave me a funny message. I don't trust these things very much.
Nor should you.
I think we should be getting there in just a second.
Van's on the phone. He's trying to get on the computer, but I told him to keep on the phone until he got onto the computer.
Okay, very good. Well, we have new members here, and we have people who are on the phone and on screen as well. So I wonder if we could just take a moment.
Okay.
If we could just take a moment to introduce ourselves, and maybe when Van appears, we'll go to the screen. But Matt, could I ask you to start off?
Sure. Matt Lehman, City Council.
Teresa Nielsen, also City Council.
John Barlow, new to the Planning Commission.
Diane Crocker, new to the City Council.
And Mr. Workman?
Chris Workman, City Manager.
Thank you. And Ms. Post?
Ruth Coast, City Recorder.
Thank you. I'm Ruth Causey. Obviously, I'm not Mayor Jones, but I get to pinch hit for him when he's out of town, which is the case tonight.
And I'm Gary Connor, Planning Commission.
Catherine Pratt, Deputy City Attorney. I'm just filling in for Jim right now.
I'm Christopher McMorrin. I'm also new to the City Council.
Tim Malott, new to the Planning Commission.
Picked up on the planner, city planner for Loma, also Benton County planner.
And Jessica?
I'm Jessica Andrade, City Council.
And Van?
Van Hunsaker. Can you see me?
Yes.
We can see you and hear you.
Okay, good.
Van, you're on the Planning Commission, is that?
Oh, yes, I'm on the Planning Commission. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. I've been to 2 retreats this month, and so there's no way I was going to ask you to engage in some kind of icebreaker. So we'll forego that.
Shucks.
And move on. I know this will be sort of redundant, but City Recorder, may we have the roll call, please?
Sure. Councilor Jessica Andrade.
Present.
Councilor Ruth Causey.
Here.
Councilor Diane Crocker.
Here.
Councilor Matt Lehman.
Here.
Councilor Christopher McMorrin.
Here.
Councilor Teresa Nielsen.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Gary Connor.
Here.
Planning Commissioner John Barlow.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Van Hunsaker.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Timothy Malott.
Here.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And Planning Commissioner Darlene Rose is signing on.
I'm here. I haven't figured out my Zoom thing yet, but I'm here.
Well, you look great. And we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, then we'll move into our work session, which focuses on the implementation plan for updated comprehensive plan policies, which I believe is Mr. Deppes.
So really nice meeting all of you, for those that I haven't met or meeting for the first time today. So just a little bit of a background. I've been here for 4 years, and I feel we've been kind of, from the beginning, kind of hitting certain updates, kind of like nickel and diming it, kind of a little bit here, a little bit there as things kind of came up. And then a couple of years ago, I think it was the 2020, the city got a grant and we were able to do the housing needs analysis, economic opportunities. The streetscape project was in the works of getting its funding and some of its engineering, and that kind of came together. And with that, we also implemented a downtown revitalization plan. So we have all these moving parts going on at the same time, and it was really kind of taking the next step of taking all of these policy kind of driven recommendations, studies, kind of analysis of what really events on the ground are in Philomath and what's needed. And a lot of what came out of that ended up being working for the last year, maybe even a little bit longer, on developing policies. And for those who are on city council and are not new to city council or planning commission, they were a big part of getting the new policies for the comprehensive plan and the ability for us to start making some kind of real on the ground changes. So we have everything in place, but it's really just a blueprint. The policies are really the enforceable part of the documents, so the main documents for the city are the policies kind of build and help develop the code, and the code is what we use to enforce and direct planning and redevelopment and general activities for how the city kind of moves along and reacts to. It puts kind of a foundation of what we're, how we want to grow. So what we wanted to do now is, since we've got through the comprehensive plan, and we are kind of in a position now to take some of those policies and actually implement them. And this is going to be kind of a long process too, and there's kind of a lot of moving parts. So we wanted to bring both elected officials and appointed officials together, because a lot of this is going to actually fall on the planning commission's kind of plate and preview to kind of put things together. That's where a lot of the work and the outreach and the citizen involvement and those type of activities are going to come along and work through a lot of those type of changes and recommendations that will eventually come to the city council. So it's going to be, there's kind of as the memo says, there's limitations on what we can do. So we kind of wanted to take this opportunity, and we highlighted, we took some of the sections of the comprehensive plan that we feel are probably the three main things that are going to drive change and drive development. And that's the housing section and the economy section, which is kind of economic development. It's kind of commercial development, industrial, that type of thing. It's kind of your employment base. But coming before that is our citizen involvement, and we've made a huge increase in policies for citizen involvement. If you're comparing the last comprehensive plan and this one, I mean, quite a bit more, quite a bit amount of additional outreach. And that's what we feel it's going to take to accomplish a lot of these changes, because a lot of these changes are big changes. They're going to probably entail not only just like public outreach, but open house, demonstrations, and a lot of follow through. There are some timetables that we put on here, and we're not really sure how long some of this is going to take. I think some of it might go a little bit faster. I think you can knock off probably the last 2 months that I think we included, because those are like public hearing type notices, but there's still going to be a lot of preemptive work that's going to be done. But I don't want to go through all of these policies, but what we hope that you guys had an opportunity to read some of the comments, because they kind of direct or take some of the direction that we want to go based on some of these policies, and just kind of open it up for some questions on any of that, or some clarification, or even maybe some additional stuff that we haven't kind of looked at or saw, or feel that could be very beneficial to this. So just saying that, I don't know if Chris has anything to add, but we try to give you enough comments and directions where I think you guys could look that over, and we can go through these like one at a time too. We can go through some housing. We could then focus on a little bit of the what we want to do with the economic development, and then we can go on to the Main Street, or how some of these overlap as well.
No, I appreciate the words, Pat, and the good introduction. I'll just add, for tonight, the intent is to kind of go through this overview just to get Planning Commission, City Council all on the same page on where staff feels like we need to be headed. Take any input that you've got. We don't intend to get down into the weeds or even high level into the trees and bushes at this point. We really just kind of high level. If there's things in here that pique your interest, great. Jot down some comments and hold that, because all this stuff's going to be coming back in front of you, either at the Planning Commission level to really vet it out, or onto the City Council level for the hearings. And so you'll have plenty of time to comment on any of these particular issues. Then tonight, it's really just, here's all the issues that are out there based on what we've seen in the housing needs analysis, the economic opportunities analysis, the Main Street plan, the revitalization plan, all these plans that we've done over the last couple of years. Here's all the topics that they've kind of raised to the surface that we need to address, as Pat has said. So for tonight, I think it's real helpful just to go through, we provided you probably more information that you needed for tonight, but we want to make sure everybody had the background and could get up to the same spot. But if you want to focus just on the highlighted comments, these highlighted comments are things that we intend, or that in our view, that the Planning Commission is going to tackle. If something's not highlighted, it doesn't mean it's not something that's going to be addressed. It just means it's something that the Planning Commission is not going to focus in on. It may be something the City Council is going to do, or staff's going to do, but it's not something that we're looking to really direct your Planning Commission to take on. Those are going to be reserved to something that has to do with zoning, something that has to do with allowed uses or development code, something in the standards in the code. Anything outside of that didn't get highlighted, because we really just want to focus on those Planning Commission related activities that we'll be looking at in the next 12 to 18 months or so. So for tonight, I think it'd be most helpful to have Pat just kind of go through. We can start with the citizen involvement. We've highlighted several sections in there, and when we get to the goals and the policies that we look at. And I don't think we need to read through all this. We're assuming everybody's had a chance to go through it, but maybe we'll just start with like page 3 on that first attachment.
I have a number of questions and statements about process and how this is all going to happen. Would that be better up front?
Sure.
Or later on?
Take them up front.
Okay. So I guess, where do I start?
Let me interrupt you before you start.
Good.
I'll just get a note for those at home. We're having some problems with the video camera. It's not the camera. I think it's actually the graphic card in the laptop, because I've swapped video or cameras and it's still doing the same error. So I'm just going to apologize. I believe the audio is coming through fine. But if you're watching at home, if the videos gets tweaky and whatever, just we know that. We're not ignoring you. I just can't fix it in the middle of a meeting. So. And
I did post a comment on the YouTube that says, sorry, but the audio is working.
It's a little distracting when it starts flitching, but I just wanted to make note. We're aware of it. We just can't fix it right in the middle of a meeting. I can't swap out laptops. So with that, go ahead.
Sure. So the first one I had is your proposed schedule kind of has addressing the economic, kind of the business area zoning, and then for an extended period of time, and then moving on to residential. But it seems to me that with the office residential existing zoning, and the idea that some of that might become residential, some of it might become commercial in some fashion and mixed use, and we're going to kind of redefine that. I have a hard time seeing how we could go through comprehensively with the business side of things and then comprehensively with the residential side of things, since there's an area that's probably going to get split, and then there's overlap. So to me, it seems like, we obviously can't do everything simultaneously, but I have a hard time seeing how we get all the way to conclusion without at least talking about what all the adjacent, zoning designations are, so that we can kind of work it comprehensively. So that's probably my biggest comment on the proposed schedule, and I don't know what the answer is, but that's my thought.
Yeah, I think it was hard. I mean, we thought about that too. I probably briefly kind of put in there that there's going to be some stuff that overlaps, just like you said, and I think comprehensively we could look at one or the other, a little bit more focus on one than the other. But there's going to be definite overlap. We knew that, especially with the mixed use, the downtown core, and the ideas of getting some more density in there. Again, there's so many smaller issues too with existing nonconformities that we want to deal with, that we can work through that to eliminate those, but also at the same time get commercial with residential above and stuff like that. So I think where you're going to see a lot of that crossover is going to be in the downtown core area. I think the other areas on the OR, I think will go one way or the other. They will go either, I could say there's so many things that came out of these studies, but as far as zoning districts and stuff, we have a deficit of commercial rezoned property land, and we have a deficit of high density residential land. And then we're talking about taking away OR, which essentially is commercial. It's dealt with commercial. However, you look at almost anywhere that there's OR and it's established neighborhoods and stuff like that. There's a little bit of crossover in the downtown and in the kind of the core area down here. But if you're looking down College Street and all the other areas, they're really kind of out of place to have a commercial development. So we want to look at those. I was even looking at one today, and just on Applegate, just as the couplet's coming up, there's some OR there, and I was like, I didn't know which way to go, because it backs right up to commercial, but it's right there by the school where it's all residential. So I mean, there's going to be some hard choices to do there, or maybe something in the middle that we can find, because I think even with the high density, you want the high density next to the commercial or the downtown core. So we might find that there's, some of that stuff answers itself. It's like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity to get some high density. And then I think at some point we're going to have to start taking measure of how much, are we getting to a point in what some of the studies say is needed, or do we want to go a little bit further? Do we want to hold back and wait and see what happens? Because sometimes if you put too much out there, nothing will get done, or it won't be as condensed. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of crossover. And I think we'll learn a little bit throughout the journey of this. And it may change too. There may be a month that we take off and say, we should focus maybe on this downtown area, and then with what we can establish there and learn from there, might be able to kind of trickle out, especially down College Street. I think is going to be an important thing.
And is the idea that all of these different things will be worked through the Planning Commission before it goes to the City Council for final, or were you thinking that it would kind of go piecemeal to the City Council?
I think there's going to be big chunks. I don't think it's going to be like a whole, everything in housing is going to go. There's going to be, I think, large chunks that you're going to see. and then they're gonna make some moves. And I think part of that's gonna be because, in my opinion, I think we're gonna need to do a lot of outreach. There's gonna need to be a lot of citizen involvement, a lot of outreach, probably some open houses, probably a lot of just general bringing the neighborhoods in to talk about these, because a lot of these really do impact the neighborhood. And so I think we don't want to go beyond, because I'm not sure if the city council knows this, but I'm pretty sure the planning commission knows this, that when we were going through the housing needs analysis and the economic opportunities analysis, we didn't have that much citizen involvement. We certainly, I think we did our part of trying to get the word out there, advertisement, Facebook, postings, everything. We just didn't get the involvement. And that's okay sometimes on certain studies, but I think when you're really affecting land use and zoning certifications or classifications, we gotta be really careful and make sure people really know what's going on and what's gonna happen to their, what's happening to their property. So that's where I think I think the timing of that and the outreach and what the results of that are, I think are going to be important to how this goes forward. But most of it is going to be at the planning commission.
Commissioner Hunsaker has a comment, question.
Yeah, related. It seems like to me that we need to, I mean, other than the citizen involvement, need to work on that zoning map first. We can't change any ordinances regarding development until we have those zones set wherever it is that we want them. And I guess it seems like to me we could work on the zoning and the zoning map and the citizen involvement at the same time, because those are big questions. Just like was said earlier, and we're not until we decide, the zoning is going to be right here, right here, and right here. We won't be doing any code changes. That's all I had to say.
Again, Jesse, again, Pat and I have talked about so much of this and keep going around, but some of that is, we need to do all of it, right? And really, ideally, do all of it at the same time, and we can. I mean, we've got to take a priority stance. At the same time that we're looking at zoning, Commissioner Hunsaker, we're going to be looking at zoning, but we're also looking at potential new zones. We're going to look at allowed uses within that zone. If we're just looking to expand the C2, for example, or expand the C1, the downtown commercial zone, until we define what's allowed in that commercial downtown zone, we may not have a good comfort level of how far to expand it because we don't all know what all it entails. So they're going to go hand in hand. You've really got to do both at the same time, and that's going to affect housing and it's going to affect housing code. So again, it's going to be in pieces. At the staff level, we're going to try to bring it in ways that it makes sense, but we just really need to all accept that we're not going to be able to do everything all at once. We're going to have some things that we move forward on, knowing that there's more changes to come, and eventually when we get to the end of this process, we'll have something that we can look back on and say, yeah, now all the pieces are in place. Until then, we're going to have some pieces of the puzzle in place and others are just going to have to not be in place yet. And again, you hope you time it right and the developments come in the right order, that you don't wish you'd have done one before you did the other. But again, the reality is what we're looking for is just, here's what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on the citizen involvement. Then we're going to shift focus to the economic portions of it. That's going to be zoning and code language. And those are going to sometimes be a little separate. Sometimes they're going to be the same conversation, talking about zoning and code change at the same time. And then what we're going to bring to the Planning Commission and to the public, though, is going to be based on all the decisions or the discussions we've had to now. Here's the decisions that are going to be made. That's going to be, again, a little bit bigger puzzle piece, if you will, or smaller pieces put together. But we're still not going to have addressed residential. That's okay. We just need to get those pieces in place and move forward. So I hear what you're saying. but it's not going to be as simple as just get all the zoning in place first and then look at code. Or, we're just not going to be able to get there. So it'll be a little bit messy before it is less messy.
All right.
Councillor Lehman.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to beat a dead horse here, but the carbon-friendly spaces requirements that are coming down the pipe seem to be like they're going to be implemented right after we finish this process. And I'm wondering if we want to get ahead of that and at least let everybody know what the size requirements are and what the minimum requirements are for those areas, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to haggle back and forth about what we want to allow in certain areas if we're going to put a carbon-friendly spaces overlay over the top of it anyway.
That's a great example of it's going to be code changes there, and then there's going to be some zoning changes potentially there, right? So we'll bring you what the requirements are going to be, at least as far as we know, or what they're likely to be. Then we'll look at what zone is that appropriate for, and then we'll have to look at the neighborhoods and figure out what neighborhood is that most appropriate for, and then make sure that we're updating zoning and code language to conform with what we anticipate is going to come forward in the climate-friendly area. So we're not going to ignore it, go through this process, and then turn around and just redo the process when the CFA comes through. We'll keep an eye on CFA regulations as they move forward and integrate that into the process. We are doing the economic stuff first. There's quite a bit of information on the CFAs now, more administrative rules to come out, as you know, but I think we've got a pretty good feel for where that's going to land, and we'll just need to make sure that we're hitting those targets or exceeding them in those areas. But yeah, we're not going to ignore the CFA requirements. We'll try to embed those into either the code language and or the zoning for those areas.
So the reason I wanted to bring that up is one of the target metrics that they have is a combination of jobs and housing per acre. And back to what you were talking about, if we're doing mixed use, anyway, it complicates things a little bit.
Yeah, and again, we've not gotten that far into the details yet, but I think when we start looking at office residential zone, or we start looking at the commercial zones, we start looking for areas for, it's really going to be a question of where does the high density residential go, right? And that's how you're going to hit those metrics, that the carbon friendly areas that the state has pushed out on us, we're going to have to comply with. It's really a matter of where can you fit that high density housing and where next to your commercial districts can you put it. So that's a residential question because we're talking R3, but it's also in a commercial district or a potentially current commercial district. So there's going to be some crossover, right? But that conversation will be about where do we put our mixed use, i.e. the carbon friendly area, which is really just a mixed use area. Where do we put that?
And it would be super helpful if we could get some kind of a visual representation of what the 25 acres would look like compared to the footprint of Columbus.
Yeah. I think we have those. I did 3 or 4 examples when we had that first public outreach meeting. I still have those. So when we get to that point, I've got, here's what it looks like on College. Here's what it looks like between Apple and Maine. I've got a couple of different spots what 25 acres looks like because it's hard for me to visualize. It was in the breakout session. I can get them to you. Awesome. Anyway, when we have that discussion, yes, we need to know what 25 acres in Philomath looks like block-wise. Is it further north? Is it further east? There's some options there. And if you don't know what a climate-friendly area looks like yet, you're not in the minority. It's okay. This is new state regulation that we'll be doing because of our proximity to Corvallis as a metro area. And so there's just it's essentially a higher density encouragement for mixed use where you've got commercial, higher density residential that's not auto-centric planning, and those tend to be near your downtown areas or higher commercial area. So there's some minimum requirements that the state's putting on us that we'll just need to, again, make sure that gets embedded into our code. Pat's talked about this as well. It may be an overlay district, so it might exceed multiple zones, but that overlay district would have those similar requirements. So there's different ways to go about it. Keep an eye on it.
And part of this too, this may be jumping ahead of ourselves, I know Chris didn't want us to do, but there's 2 points of view. is Philomath going to be a bedroom community where everyone comes back, drives a car home, works somewhere in Corvallis or Albany or wherever, and then comes back and is driving back here? Or do we want to create some areas of job creation in here? And we have all kinds of, I mean, you look at the map and the first thing that pops out is all that purple, all of that light industrial. And is there areas there that could go commercial? You know, we've had a lot of interest. I mean, that's been light industrial. It hasn't produced jobs, but you do have a major highway going through your town. That some of that area, we have no large parcels that we could put maybe commercial businesses that are like high employee operated.
Footprint.
Yeah, footprints. We got all these small little small little pieces, and everyone knows how hard it is to do consolidation to create something, and then you're tearing down and rebuilding. So now we're trying to create an opportunity for some larger parcel, maybe regional commercial, rather than just your downtown, without taking away from areas that would, or businesses that would come and populate a downtown, be successful for small downtown walkable community. But you got a major highway going through your town, so there's some regional options there. But also on top of the regional commercial, there's job creation, and along with that comes high density adjacent to it. So those are some of the ideas that we're going to start floating out there. When you were talking, like what Van was saying, just go and rezone things. Me and Van have talked about a lot of these things too, but they need to be vetted. They need to go through the whole process and have everybody kind of give their input on it and the best way to approach it. So,
Commissioner Hunsaker had another comment.
Oh, go ahead, Ben.
I wasn't going to say this, but the one that Pat just was talking about, I believe will kill what limited downtown commercial we have if we contemplate putting a big box store on the east side of town. So I'll always be against that.
Good discussion for future meetings. Yeah. Chair Connor, did you have any other more general procedural or?
Yeah, a lot of it I'll save for later tonight or a future time, but the one other thing I wanted to ask is the whole process. We start with the Planning Commission and the public outreach, and for a lot of the things we've done a lot of work, and then we've just kind of thrown it over the fence to the city council, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of work, and if there's like a huge redirection that comes from the council, I don't know if that's the most efficient process. So I guess I'm wondering, what is the kind of interim feedback process from the city council to the planning commission, or if that's just not how it works and I can just forget about it. I mean, we do have Ruth coming to the meeting, so there's a little bit of opportunity there, but it's just something I'm thinking about as we're launching into more than a year of effort and plenty of long meetings that, city council could just put a great big X through 3 paragraphs that we spent 4 hours, right?
Yeah, I think where it's appropriate, this level of meeting kind of work session, I could see these intermittent throughout over the next year and a half.
Okay.
I don't know that I'd set up like a regularly scheduled joint meeting, but I think where appropriate, that's okay. But honestly, I'm going to encourage your city council to trust your planning commission to be the committee for citizen involvement. That's the role that you play, is to engage the community in land use decisions, hold the public hearings, do the outreach. And when something goes through that process, comes to the city council, I would hope that the city council would take note of all that work that's been done and wouldn't head 180 in the other direction. They're going to recognize that this work is coming to us not because 7 commissioners felt that, it's because we've done a lot of outreach and churned a lot of this over, and this is the end result.
Yeah.
I think the council that I know is going to take a lot of stock in that. So I don't see those, but I do see opportunities where we can give some updates, maybe have a joint meeting and make sure that the council is kind of on the same page as we're moving forward.
And hopefully council is involved in those public outreach events as well. So if there's good ideas, don't wait.
Right.
Bring them early. The other general statement I want to make is I feel like a big part of what I see my mission as is education for the public and for new members of council and commission about what we're doing here. There's a lot of things about Oregon state laws and history that completely brings us to a very specific mission, and most people are not aware of that. They feel like we're just a group of people who get to make decisions and we can decide, and that's not the case. If we decide something that's contrary to state law, it'll put the city in a bind. And there's also a master plan at work here that I think we need to inform people of. So that's certainly something I really hope we can collaborate on those public outreach events, and try to get maybe even a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, inflammatory is not quite the right word, but say, oh, we're going to change what's allowed in the city. We're going to change what's allowed to be built here, 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 and here. So please give us your input. I think press and other ways we can hopefully stir up some excitement and interest, because in my experience on the Planning Commission, I think it's been something like 5 years now, people show up way too late in the process. When you're just about done, it's like, that would have been great input 4 months ago. So I want to try to help that process and really do the citizen engagement well this time, but that's easier said than done.
Exactly, Councillor Crocker.
Is there a CCI or a CIP in place at this time for this? The Committee for Citizen Involvement and the Citizen Involvement Program?
So
Is that in existence?
Committee for Citizen Involvement is the role of the Planning Commission. They've served that role. That's according to the comprehensive plan that's designated in the updated Chapter 1 as citizen involvement. It doesn't have to be your Planning Commission, but was kind of vetted out between the Planning Commission, City Council. That's what was decided. So that'll be that group. The CIP is embedded in Chapter 1 of that comprehensive plan. So it's not a separate standalone policy. The citizen involvement plan is Chapter 1 of the comprehensive plan. It spells out all of the engagement that's going to take place, the policies that we want to follow. So that's all included there.
It just talks about meetings annually, one meeting annually. That's not enough to do anything. So I was wondering if things have already been happening. And I just know as a citizen, people are busy and they're not likely to come and get involved until it affects their home or their neighborhood. And so I think the sooner we get out, and maybe you've already done this, the neighborhoods that we're talking about, I think we can see a step up in involvement, which is where you're saying too late, but if we can get that out sooner than later,
right,
that to inspire them to get involved, because people will not, I don't think, just get involved for the goodness of contributing.
Yeah, and that's why I bring it up, because as Chris said, the job of the Planning Commission is to find a way to make people more involved, and it is even more now than before we updated that comprehensive plan last year. So it's very general, but we have to figure out the execution to make it happen.
Which again, that's the first thing we want to address. And with that in mind, I think I even stated that in the memo, is that citizen involvement piece is going to, whatever decision we make there, we want that to carry forward through the rest of the policies and code updates we're making. We'll make sure that we've got that citizen involvement piece right. There's things that we don't do today that we could start doing. There's things that we do today that maybe the public doesn't know that we do, or there's other ways that we can reach out to people and get them involved first. I kind of like your statement being inflammatory. Maybe we need to go into the neighborhood and say, you're going all commercial, meeting tomorrow.
I'm thinking along the lines of the zoning for your house is going to change.
Right.
Come help us decide what it's going to change to. That I hope will get some interest.
We'll use your language. I like that better.
Yeah.
And other than just doing Facebook which works for me, but it doesn't work for everybody, can the council help by going door to door in some of these neighborhoods and handing out a pamphlet that shows what we're doing and trying to stir up involvement?
Potentially, yeah, I think everything's on the table. So we'll talk about that first with the planning commission, see what they want to do.
Okay.
Sounds like they might be volunteering the city council to go door to door.
Some of them, not every, I'm not speaking for everybody.
Yeah.
We can feed some inflammatory words to the press on the side too. See if we can generate some interest.
Just with respect to the one meeting a year that you mentioned, I believe the objective of that meeting is to assess how effective the communication approach has been.
Right.
Not that that's the only time during the year that
Yeah,
communication is dealt with.
That was the intent.
Yes.
So should we dive into the communication, citizen involvement policies that we feel we should, the topics that we want to address first, since we're kind of there a little bit already. So there's the background information. We start getting into the actual goals on page 3 of the attachment, and there's just some comments there. I think generally, are there any concerns or questions or comments about any of the staff comments there on policy 11, 12, or 2122, 2425?
I have a question with respect to the organization you mentioned in 1.1. Can you give me an example of the orgs you're thinking about?
I think specifically, I was thinking like reaching out to Chamber of Commerce if it's a commercial issue, just trying to utilize other existing organizations that are there. The Chamber is the one that comes to mind first. The school district, when you've got an issue in and or around school and or residential neighborhoods, typically we give a notice to the surrounding neighborhood, but I don't know that we ever give notice to the school district unless it's an annexation issue. Or, we typically get feedback if it's maybe just that. Subdivisions go out there, but I don't know we specifically target the school district and ask for feedback. We may do it anyway, but I don't know that it's in our code that says solicit feedback from the city council on developments larger than 200 units, for example, right? So there's 2 examples.
Okay, thank you.
If we're changing the zoning across the street from the elementary school, the school board might care.
We should at very least ask them if they care and then provide let them know when the hearing's going to be, right?
Can we also use that to get information out to the public, like putting flyers in their kids' backpacks when they send them home? That kind of stuff?
Sometimes we're a little careful with that, the school has a policy. I mean, we could reach out. If the policy has changed a little bit. I know that less from the city side with my volunteer stuff with the Frolic. We do that, and sometimes they're very warm about it, and other things they're not so much. So that's a school policy. I'm not sure, but we could look into that for sure. Appropriate.
I have a general comment on the citizen outreach stuff. How are we going to measure whether or not we're successful? And I hope that it's not just based on how many people come to the public hearings, because that's usually pretty small. But it seems like some of us on the city council at least get bogged down in the old, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink thing. Like, we notice everything. We all do our own personal outreach, and then still one person goes up to the public hearing, and then we're going to make a decision based on public input. Is that really public input? And if it's not, then how are we going to measure whether or not the thing is just not interesting, or if citizens would be involved if they knew that we were doing it? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to figure out how we can measure whether we're successful in outreach or not.
I think going back to Gary's point, having something that's more appealing than a public hearing, just the term public hearing doesn't sound like a really good time to me, but using the open house that Pat described and more of a casual setting, people can come and voice their opinion. That's how I would measure success, would be attendance at events like that, or how many people we talk to at the farmer's market, assuming this is going to go into farmer's market weather. And, things like that.
So I guess, is there going to be a threshold, like, because we could do a lot of work and then only 15 people show up to the 2 public events we have, and then does that mean that the work that we've done has not been validated through the public process, or does that mean that people truly don't care about this kind of stuff and just want us to make a decision? You see what I'm saying?
A little bit of both of that. But my experience with when you are rezoning, like it would not be out of line to walk College Street, all of those houses that are OR, and saying we're going to take you to residential, or we're thinking about bringing you into this mixed use thing. Would not be out of line, and I've done that before. And whether or not you can gauge that or not, I mean, some people will care. They may not. They may show up to another meeting. They may just verbally say, and then you'd have to take whoever's doing the surveys, as take them at their word. But get someone do the north side, someone do the south side, and you get an idea, and tell them the pluses and minuses of it. We know that has been OR. We've talked about just like the light industrial or industrial park that's been there for decades and hasn't developed. So as this OR, and it hasn't really become any type of commercial development what it was intended for. But since I've been here, I've seen all of the negative parts of it, where people that want to build, want to add on to their house, and they can't because they have to follow the commercial standards, or they want to subdivide because they want to sell that piece off and have a house built there for a family member, and they can't without it being commercial first floor. So there's all kinds of negatives, but so we're looking, well, it's been sitting there and it really hasn't become commercial. So, and people probably don't really know that. They move into their house and they just live there, and it's their home. They don't really know what their zone is. But if you explain to them, like, if you ever wanted to put an addition onto your house, you you'd be coming in, you wouldn't be able to just follow residential standards. Now you got to follow commercial standards, and there's going to be restrictions to that. So give them a little bit of the plus, explain, I spend 15 minutes with them and explaining that to them. And I think you'll get a pretty good survey, and I don't think it would even take that long. I mean, there's a finite amount of houses there that you can go to and speak to. So I think maybe that's a way to gauge it, because you're right, people, especially over the summer, is the worst time, and we do a lot of our work over the summer. We up to 2 meetings a month, even in the summer, and we didn't get anybody. People are doing their thing. So, but with stuff as serious as rezoning, where there's legal aspects involved as well, reaching out to them and specifically getting, finding out what their position is on it. If they like it, they don't like it. We'll like I said, be some type of survey. We'll really just take down every property and engage it. And then if we have to go back and find out, or readdress some other questions, or we won't. But,
I see Commissioner Hunsaker's hand up, but just a couple on to Pat real quick. I don't know that there's a great answer to that question. I think one of the metrics is going to be involvement overall, but I think another maybe more important metric is going to be the satisfaction of those involved. Did they feel like the process was fair? Did they feel like the process was, extensive enough? Did they feel like it was too long and dry out? So I think you could gauge, and that's going to be gauged by the end result. And then those that come and testify, they may be opposed to it, but feel like, hey, I appreciate having the time. I appreciate the notices. I appreciate the opportunities to give my testimony. They may not agree with the end result, but they can still look back and feel like the city as a whole treated them fairly and gave them opportunity to participate in the process. That would be a sign of success to me, even if there's disagreement on the final outcome. But I don't know that there's a metric. There's going to be several things on there we can look at. To your question, though, does, I think, point back to the Planning Commission when we're talking about citizen involvement. What does that citizen involvement look like? Let's put a plan in place. Let's put expectations in place. Let's think through that a little bit. Let's not have a public hearing on a Friday at 6 o'clock, right? I mean, let's be reasonable what we're doing and when we're planning things out. I think we can get there. But again, I saw Commissioner Hunsaker and then I see Councilor.
I'd like to go to Councilor McMorrin first.
Oh, I guess I'm just really big on that we need to go to people, because I feel like, and I'll keep it brief because I feel like this has already been said, but just like the barriers sometimes to, coming to City Hall and talking, for whatever reason, people sometimes aren't able to do that. So I feel like gauging it based on that is not necessarily fair. But if we actually go knock on your door and ask what you think, and you still don't care, then I think at that point we can take that as a you actually don't care. Because at that point there's no barrier to you telling us what you think when we're standing on your doorstep asking what you think. But like, if someone doesn't come down here to a city council meeting at 7 p.m., that doesn't mean they don't care. It just means they couldn't be here at 7 p.m. on a Monday night. So I'm big on, I think we do need to get out there more. And I think we've been on the right track with that, but just keeping on that track.
Dan, go ahead.
I think those are all good questions. I will note under goal 4, accountability, the planning commission or the citizen involvement committee is supposed to, evaluate this program annually. And I think gave some good questions that as we think about how we're implementing this or developing an implementation process, that we consider what you guys are saying here, so that we do in some way codify what if we're accomplishing anything. The other thing was on the, I guess I marked it under the goal 2 engagement about citizen awareness. Could we get I guess for the planning commission, just a list, like a page or whatever it would take that says, right now the city does these things, for this purpose or whatever, so that we kind of can start with what we know is already going on as far as involving the citizens. And, it might be including, we're on Facebook and we have a website, and, all those different things. But then I suppose there's probably things I don't even know about what the city does. And if we had that list, that might help us, the planning commission, figure out what else is needed.
Yeah, I envision that would come to you the very first meeting. We're talking about citizen involvement. Here's what we're currently doing. Here's what the calls for. So no, that's a great suggestion, man.
Thank you.
Councilor Nielsen, you had your hand up.
Just briefly, I think personally, one of the most advantageous and beneficial citizen outreach that I was a part of was the streetscape. When we went out and met with the businesses about, Chelsea had organized that streetscape, meeting with the business owners face to face and talking to them about the streetscape project and letting them know what was going to be happening and providing all the information there and having that one-on-one conversation face to face, I think had real value. And as Christopher had mentioned, that as Councilor Warren has mentioned, that there's value in that. And then we can say, oh, if I'm not interested, then we know, having had that conversation. And I thought my interactions with those 12 business owners was, I think, very advantageous, not only to me, but to have that connection, to put a face to who their counselor was and to have that conversation about the concerns they had. And I could note what they said, and then I could also put at ease, oh, well, look what we have for you, and describing what's going on. A lot of, I think there's a lot of credence in that communication and that face-to-face.
Councilor Crowker.
Just a quick, to address you just a little bit. If we end up only getting 5 people, our evaluation is we failed in the community involvement perhaps, but I don't think it means that all your work is thrown away. I think the work can be valuable and we can use it. We just have failed to inspire the community to come in and embrace it. And we can try, but we can't force them, yes.
I just had a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Just more, are we going through each of these pages one by one? Because it is like 7. All right, just checking. So maybe we should move on.
I don't believe that. So economy is the next one. So again, we'll kind of be going there next. And again, cognizant of the time, questions on anything on page 7 or 8? Councilor McMorrin?
I just had a question on comment 10. It specifically calls out breweries, wineries, distilleries. I'm all for that. I just wondered why we specifically call that out and not any other types of businesses.
Because we've had interest in that in recent years and we don't call it out specifically in the code. We end up trying to figure out, is it commercial? Is it light industrial?
Okay.
Can you squeeze it into light industrial? Is it, yeah, there's enough interest there. And again, I don't think breweries / restaurants are going away anytime soon.
Sure.
So we just need to figure out where they're appropriate. We need to stick them someplace.
Okay.
Either
So sort of a
conditional
gray
uses in
area.
both or something. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a gray area that we've had a lot of concern about and we really don't have a great place to put them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to say I also loved everything in comment 11 about the Timbertown theme and childcare. I'm big on both of those.
Good, Tim.
Can I ask a question? What is the quote-unquote definition of timber town theme? I've heard that statement used I've seen it in meeting minutes from about having to do with use of city property. I've seen it I've heard it here. What is the definition of a timber town theme? Please understand that I've done work with Disney and done a lot of theming. So I'd like to get at least a
Picture.
10,000 foot level of what we're talking about.
I'll share my vision, and it's going to be different than everybody else's, right?
Well, that's part of my worry.
Yeah. So before I tell you my definition of Timbertown theme, the intent all along, and I've said this multiple times, is not to have a Disneyland theme. This is not going to be like going to Sisters and everything's Western and, they're making plastic sagebrush to roll down the roads, And
I like it.
or Leavenworth for that matter, right? On a different scale, right? This is not Leavenworth where everything has to have this look and get approved by a panel before you can put your sign up, all that stuff, right? So that's not what I envision. And I don't think we would want to go that far, but one step that the Planning Commission Council have made recently is to require, for example, 3 different building materials in your building. So you don't end up with just a flat panel of T111 or a flat panel of brick, and it's just, you drive by it and it's uninteresting. It's, maybe regardless of the type of material, it's just that it lacks interest, it lacks any appeal. When you require the 3 different building materials, you've got more interest there. And so there are specific materials that are permitted. There's others that are not on that list of permitted uses, which you need to come to the Planning Commission and say, hey, could I use this material? And so the hope of that is, again, that you get more interest in the types of building used. There's encouragement, and we've started working on and had to kind of put on the shelf the process of developing a design manual for the downtown area that will give very specific examples for the types of materials we'd like and the types that we'd like to see integrated that would resemble a kind of Timbertown theme. In my mind, Timbertown theme is kind of an industrial look. It's not It's not colonial, so it's not brick and black wrought iron light posts, right? That'd be kind of a colonial look. To me, the Timbertown more is what you would go if you walked onto a mill site and you got, gooseneck overhead lights, and you've got more industrial finishes, corrugated metal, exposed beam timbers, and a mixture of all of those materials into one. The Planning Commission looked at several different buildings that we were able to pull from other locations, looked at those when we were looking at different building materials and things. But today, one of the issues that I have right now is our code doesn't really give a lot of clarification what that means, and so it's a little ambiguous. We've got a meeting with a future business coming to town, and they're looking at a renovation of the existing building, and we're going to show them some pictures, and then we're going to show them the code, and they're going to do what the code says and hopefully integrate some things that the pictures show. So we need to, in my view, one of the things I'll be encouraging the Planning Commission is look at how do we encourage that Timbertown look through the development code, as opposed to some pretty pictures we ask people, hey, do something like this. But we want enough variety that it's not tying the hands and everything looks completely uniform either. Right. Does that help?
I'm going to pick on Commissioner Connor for a moment because he did some, or was involved in some of the initial outreach, presenting different images to the public and asking them to respond at the farmers market.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, is correct me if I'm wrong, but I think where it started was when they were working on the Main Street plan, and the landscape architect and the lighting designers gave several different options for light poles, benches, and trash cans. And they had three different styles, and the one that we chose was called Timbertown. So that really is the core of the direction. So if you need a definition, that's probably the best place. And we had people put dots on pictures down at the farmers market and had a public meeting here also. So that's where it started.
It was pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. Well, yeah, depending on who you ask, but yeah.
Councilor McMorrin.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of went into my question, and you talked about it a little bit, but do we have a time frame for the design manual? Because I also saw it in it's action 1B in whatever this is, the action plan.
Sometime between citizen involvement and residential.
Okay.
It's going to be driven by the code. If we're going to update the code, it doesn't make sense to come out with it now and then have all new code. So when we feel like we've got zoning in place and code language in place, the design manual is not going to create new code. It's going to give examples of existing code, right? Here's what the code allows. Here's what the code doesn't allow.
Yeah.
But we've got to get the code there first. So I would envision sometime between commercial discussions and moving into residential, that'll be kind of an extra staff-driven task that we'll put in there. We'll get feedback and buy-in from the Planning Commission, but then staff's going to generate that and put it out there as good examples of bad examples, what the code allows and doesn't allow.
So it could be done like within the year, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to get it done this year.
Yeah.
And that's why your preference is to push on the commercial first.
Yeah.
It'll come to you. It'll come through the Planning Commission, but also come to the City Council for input.
Okay.
It'll be officially adopted because it'll have to be policy driven.
So. Because I think that would also be great to have done before the streetscapes are done, so that if businesses see the beautiful new streets and want to move in, we can have something ready to hand them. But
I'm very aware and concerned about the housing and the housing demands, but I think long-term, the consequences of not having good commercial development code going forward are probably greater and longer lasting than the residential are right now. So, affordable housing is important, and it's a big topic right now, and we just can't do everything, right? I think the long-term ramifications of not having the good commercial development code in place that we'd like to have in place today are probably bigger consequences. So. Anything else on 7 or 8? 9, 10 are blank, so that's easy. Goes into housing. So the first housing comments are pages 11 and 12 of attachment C.
Can someone explain comment CW 18? I'm not exactly sure what a planned unit developments are. PUD.
So, they've been pretty popular now for about 20 years, and they are specific. They're not really specific in code. They allow like the flexibility and of what the current code is, and I'm not sure which direction the city of Philomath is going to go in, but sometimes it's basically kind of a negotiating tool where you can allow certain variances to certain types of code that maybe because the property can't accommodate it as much, or they want to get a little bit more density than what's allowed there. And with the density, they're giving us more open space. So there's a little bit of kind of give and take with it. I've seen cities go through where it becomes kind of a legal document where you're kind of entering into an agreement, like a legal agreement that's overcoming the development code. So in some cases, you know, you're not in any way trying to go against your comprehensive plan policy, but you're really dealing more with just the code. And like I said, it typically, I mean, it's used in commercial and residential. I see it more used in residential than anything because it gives you a little bit more flexibility of design, lot sizes, mixture of housing and stuff like that, where you can have kind of something similar to what like Mill Pond did with when they came back to modify their phase, their phases 5 and 6, or I forget what phases they were, where they added a little bit of attached housing to it. And you're looking, instead of doing just a strict subdivision, you're doing kind of adding all of these different elements together. So you're not looking at a mixed use project inside of like a subdivision project. So you're getting a little bit of flexibility there. I've seen it. I haven't seen it here as much. Where I used to work, we used it almost exclusively. But you guys already require a park, you know, a small park. You know, whereas we used to negotiate for that. We used to negotiate for a pocket park on the larger developments, or more open space, or a different style of how the roads were. So I think with your system development charges and what you're able to accomplish just with Oregon law, I mean, it's probably not going to be used as much. But I think where it might come into play a lot would be in the downtown area, where you want a little bit more flexibility on smaller pieces of land, but not getting away from the overall like core identity, you know, of downside. It may not be used because we might have enough code in place for our downtown, you know, or even for larger developments that you may not ever see it being used. So, and you can also mix into commercial, and you can mix commercial. There's certain PUDs where, like for instance, in the southeast corner, you could have someone come in there with a master plan development, and they want to have a little bit of residential, high density residential, mixed use, regular commercial, office with development behind. The best possible way to approach that would be a planned unit development. And now you're just throwing all the rules out the thing and say, okay, give us your best development, and the planning commission would look at it, you know, as on its merits, but ultimately would be the city council that approves it.
Commissioner Warren.
I had a question on comment 17, and this is, I think, just sort of, it talks about, you know, reducing development costs and requirements, but also keeping quality really high. And then it talks about ADUs. The first part, that feels just like what we would like to do with, like, reduce burdens and things without reducing quality. What do we actually mean by that? I guess is my, okay. I saw an excited
So one
hand.
thing that immediately pops in my mind was like requiring utilities to be underground.
Okay, okay,
So on its face, that just adds cost, but then it also makes it easier to maintain, it looks better. Various and sundry reasons why people would prefer to have all the power cables underground rather than overhead, but is that lend itself to affordable housing? No, it does not, because it adds more expense to the developer. So that's where I think we run into conflicts on things that we want to see happen, but then trying to weight that against added expense and other barriers to people actually doing development based
right.
on the requirements.
Okay, I guess it's just that those two seem sort of intrinsically at odds. So I don't see how we can maintain both of them at a high, like, are we just saying we're tipping the scales a little bit more towards affordability? And that's what we're saying? Or I guess that comment, it just feels like we're going to go right while also going left. And I don't really understand sort of what the comment is saying, I guess. But
So let me answer the second part of the question on the ADU. We've got provisions in our development code for ADUs that aren't compliant with state law. State came in after the fact and passed some new statewide laws, and we haven't gone back in and made adjustments to our ADA. Like, we require for you to add ADU, you have to add a parking spot in your driveway. So if you have a 2-car driveway, you add an ADU, you got to add an additional parking spot in a driveway. The state came back and said, oh, you can't do that, right?
Okay.
So we need to change that in our code. We need to get in compliant with state law when it comes to ADU. So ADU is specifically called out for that reason. There's 2 or 3 provisions we need to correct, which add cost to the cost of adding an ADU, but also make it more difficult to do because it adds a cost. So that's an example of an area where are there things that our code currently requires that add costs that if we went away from them wouldn't necessarily change the development or the impact on the neighborhood, but could save some cost and allow then for more of that type of housing. Maybe not. Maybe. If there are, then that's what we're looking at, right? Are there areas that we can look at? And this would be primarily a staff function to start looking that way of where all those provisions are in place, have been in there for 20, 30 years now, that are there that really just have a lot of costs and don't really add a lot of benefit to the overall neighborhood. And if we could identify 3 or 4 of those, great. We'll make the recommendations to remove them. If it adds to more traffic than necessary, these negative things, and we'll float it out there. And if the plan commission says, yeah, we like those provisions, recognizing they add a little bit of cost, the benefit to the neighborhood is so much that it's worth it, then we won't make any changes.
I think.
Commissioner Hunziker, do you have your hand up?
Yeah.
You have your virtual hand up.
Oh, he does.
I guess partially to do with what you were just talking about. For me, and I think several of the planning commissioners, when we was doing this housing portion, we recognized that to get affordable housing, affordable housing for low-income individuals, you really need to have it in a subsidized way, meaning that I'll put it this way: the Boulevard Apartments developer, not saying he would be interested in it now, but we could potentially work with a developer, and they go through a process with the state, and somehow the state helps them with the cost, and they actually are able to provide housing at lower than what the market bears. And I think our sense was that we definitely will need some of that, and that would begin to help with the issue of affordable housing. And that's not something I don't think is particularly a planning commission effort, but I don't know if the council has made any goals or anything yet, but I would encourage them consider working with a developer to develop some sort of an apartment in the community for the very low income, and make that a goal, to work on in the next year or so. Thank you. That's all.
I can confirm that we've certainly talked about it, and I'm sure it will be reflected in our strategic plan in the coming year. It's definitely an interest of the councils to figure out where and when we can do that. Yes.
I just wanted to point out that Councilor Moore had alluded to something here, that the comprehensive plan, the text without the highlighting in the comments, represents about a year of arm wrestling between competing interests.
I'm sure.
And there was a lot of attention to the very specific wording. And so I think there's even though there wasn't a lot, there was public input to that, and there was the Planning Commission and the council. And I think it's our job now to carefully look at that text and at the very least, all of the competing interests that are brought up should be in our minds as we develop specific code. Now, where we go with that, we're all going to arm wrestle. And Van brought up the issue of low income housing, but there's also just overall housing affordability, and building housing at any level helps reduce the housing at all levels, just because you're increasing the supply. And so those are things that the Planning Commission can do something about, but they're also controversial because we're fighting against ourselves for, we want everything cheap and easy and beautiful.
High quality.
Yeah, and high quality. So I think we do need to pay careful attention to the comprehensive plan, even though it doesn't tell us exactly what to do about it.
I turned the page. I don't know if everybody else had anything else on 11 or 12, but we can move to page 13, which is the last set of policies with housing. If there were any specific comments there. First couple are zoning related, and those last ones are again looking at the code and making some provisions there. Nothing specific. We're at 720. We're in good shape. The next attachment is actually attachment D. It's mislabeled. I apologize. I changed the order. I fixed it on the agenda. I didn't catch it on the attachment. So it's attachment D is this is the action plan for the downtown revitalization plan. This was a separate study that we had done. A consultant came in. It was actually a process that was paid for through a grant that we'd received, and a regional grant that we were partner in. So we got this study done at no cost to us, which was great. Got some good inputs. I provided the entire section 7.1. This is available on the website. You can Google search it or go through the website and find it. Table 7.1A is really the code related stuff. Some of it may sound familiar. Some of it is just things we need to have in mind as the planning commissions look at this, and again, staff will bring this back again. But these were recommendations from the consultant that did the surveys, did the review, talked to council and community members. These were their comments and recommendations, mostly related to kind of some code things. So go through those. I don't know, again, if there's specific question on them, that's great. We did include all of it. A lot of this other stuff is stuff that I envision that council would be more involved in, and again, setting priorities, strategic planning, but definitely action 1A is very much directed at the planning commission taking that first leap forward. So it got highlighted. The rest of it didn't. I just wanted everybody to again have this portion of it, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions on any of these, but more than likely these will be specific things that we'll just bring up at the planning commission level.
I just want to point out that there are similar recommendations throughout all of those documents that are listed. And so I've been encouraging people in the planning commission to read through those documents and pull forward the things that are important to them. And, you know, like there's a map in this revitalization plan that I think is pretty interesting when it comes to looking at the rezoning. So this is absolutely important to pull in, but it's like there's a lot of other stuff too. You can't, right? Everything is there as an attachment. It's on the website. Right?
And some of the comments made during each of these studies has been, well, this study doesn't encompass this, or the study doesn't focus on this, or we didn't get good input on this study. And all of that is true. And so, again, from the staff level, we're going to try to be reviewing all this and bringing this all to the decision makers as well. But if there's things that we're missing or things you want to integrate, by all means, give Pat a holler, email it to them. Hey, what about this section? Is that relevant? We'll be happy to kind of forward that on as discussions go forward. It's a good place to be at, to have had so many recent studies done, but it also means there's a lot of material to cover, and I didn't want to overwhelm you tonight and just try to pull the excerpts out. So the last attachment I'll address is the real attachment E. These are recommendations coming out of the Main Street plan. The Main Street plan, if you'll remember, if you were here, was actually completed before the housing needs analysis or the economic opportunities analysis were completed. This one was started first. It looked at that downtown core. It looked at specific zoning recommendations, code recommendations. A lot of that got rolled over into the housing needs analysis and economic opportunities analysis recommendations. But this document provides a little bit more narrative than what gets captured in the other reports, as more bullet points. So again, I wanted to just include that and have that at your disposal as well. Again, it's got a couple of maps, some good background information just to get everybody up to the same speed. The page 24 is all about zoning code amendments. Again, these are just things that we'll bring up when we get to that specific meeting. We're talking about this. We're going to be referring back to these studies and reports that got generated, recognizing that they're not the solution, but they may be discussions that we have as we're getting to whatever that solution is going to be. So that's where we're at. That's where we're headed. Is everybody as excited as I am? It's going to be a fun year and a half. I'm looking forward to it. Again, we'll push the citizen involvement as much as we get there. And I will just say this, and then I'll shut up so we can move on and you guys can all get home for the night. Some of you, half of you get to stay. During the housing needs analysis, economic opportunities analysis, while those studies were done, I know that there was some anxiety about the lack of public participation. And I'm on record for having said, this is the time for the consultants to do the study, get the numbers, collect the data, get the report out. And then once the report's out, then we'll have something to talk about. And I got criticized for that. I was, no, we need the room full of people. And I just kept pushing back, like, this is really the consultant's job. They're the professional. They need to do this work. They need to provide us the data. And we've seen that the data is not 100% perfect. There's stuff missing, right? They can only provide the information that they collect. And so we know that there's flaws, and that is, again, it's not perfect. It may not be exactly what we want it to be. This is now we've turned that page, right? This is the exciting part for me, because this is a part where now it's time. Consultants giving us a report, they're gone, right? They're not going to chime back in. No, this is what I meant. Doesn't matter. Now we get to talk to the people, right? Now we get to go out, we get to engage with our residents, we get to engage with our business owners, we get to talk with our policymakers. This is the exciting part because we get to do that. I'm excited about reaching out. I'm excited about having those meetings, going to where people are and getting that process going. But I also recognize we could have meetings for a year and a half on just the economy, the economic policies and code changes, and we won't make any changes. And we'll have 4 new businesses comes down that don't have any new compliance than what they had a year ago, 2 years ago. So the process needs to be thorough, but it also needs to move forward, right? So as long as we're going in a forward direction, we can adjust our time frames, we can adjust our expectations on time limits, but we do want to get good public input, but we need to have it in pretty good intervals as well. So we'll get dates out there, we'll set expectations. If we're getting overwhelmed by data and we need to move and take more time, we will. If we get to a point where we've had good input and policymakers feel like they're comfortable making recommendations and approving things, we'll approve it, we'll make those, and we'll move on to the next thing because we have plenty of work to do. So all that said, thank you for going through that journey with us tonight a little bit, and look forward to the road ahead. It'll be great. Pat's going to be great working for us, helping us get through all this. He's an expert in what he does and does a lot better at this than what I do on the devils and the details kind of stuff. So.
All right. With that, I'd like to adjourn tonight's meeting so we can have a short break before we move into the council meeting. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the input.